Julian Casablancas doesn't steal from the Strokes and give it to the Voidz, but he worries it looks that way.
Sometimes I'm working on a Voidz song and then I'll play with the Strokes, but then as we're playing, that idea will kind of come out and vice versa. And I always have to explain to each band, I'm not stealing from one band and giving it just in my mind. And sometimes it's just location.
This interview with Anthony Fantano was recorded weeks before the Voidz would perform the live debut of Russian Coney Island, a song which quotes the hook of one of the most popular New Stroke songs, Ode to the Mets. It seems possible that Julian and the Voidz have been working on Russian Coney Island around this interview. This instance of sharing was on Julian's mind.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I was literally working on that yesterday.
So is Julian stealing from himself, or is he doing something more interesting? By taking a look at the hook, how it's used in Ode to the Mets and Russian Coney Island, and then looking at the melodic accompaniment and the bass accompaniment, we can see how different harmonically they are. By doing this, we can get a sense of how Julian sees his two different bands, the Strokes and the Voidz, and we might get a better appreciation for how he uses those two bands to do different harmonic things with the same melodic material, suggesting why Julian uses both bands. Let's take a look at the hook as it applies to Ode to the Mets.
Easy to say, easy to do, but it's not easy, maybe for you.
The hook as it's used in Ode to the Mets is a catchy earworm that perfectly targets the important chord tones in Julian's famous chord progression that goes 2, 5, 1, 6. Also known as Julian's secret sauce chord progression. The melody works so beautifully in that hook because it moves in fourths. It's going up a fourth here from the E to the A. Then that's a tritone, a fourth down. Another fourth up.
It's not the truth.
But when I did that, you probably noticed that those are the same notes that make up the arpeggiated guitar line. The bass accompaniment is crucial though for understanding the looping pattern. It begins on a high F sharp and then goes down a fifth, which is the fourth up, to the B, and then goes up a fourth to the E, and then steps down to a G sharp. What's interesting is this is all roots of the three chords, but then the final chord, C sharp minor, the bass plays that G sharp, the fifth. This bass line is really important for creating the looping cyclical pattern. It moves in fourths and then steps down to the F sharp to begin the loop pattern again. The hook is used as a vocal melody in Russian Coney Island. It's 3 notes instead of 4 notes, so it has a slightly different interval pattern because of it. That's a minor third. That's a fourth. That's a major third. There's a fourth again. But it has those major and minor thirds, which give it a little bit of a different color than Ode to the Mets, which had a strong fourth and tritone feeling. An important difference is in the melodic accompaniment. In Russian Coney Island, the melodic accompaniment is much more independent than in Ode to the Mets. In Ode to the Mets, the melodic accompaniment targeted the same chord tones as the hook, but in Russian Coney Island, the melodic accompaniment is a synth keyboard played by Jeff Kite that has its own melodic line. And it works its own way with the hook. It moves in that minor third pattern. So the melodic accompaniment in Russian Coney Island is a little different than in Ode to the Mets. The bass accompaniment is a much more jagged sound than in Ode to the Mets. It goes from A to up to D, but then steps up to E and then jumps down to the G, which is the minor third in that E. And we know that that last chord is a E again, despite having a G in the bass, because the guitars emphasize the line by playing the. But this gets an important difference between the two songs. In Russian Coney Island, there's actually no one chord. It goes from the A minor to the D, that 5 chord, to then the E, the 6 chord, and then an inversion of the E, but still an E chord. So it has a much more minor sound than an Ode to the Mets, which still has a 1 chord and is Julian's secret sauce chord progression. Russian Coney Island isn't really that. It's a different chord progression because it doesn't have that 1 in it that gives us that classic Casablancas sound. This reveals an important harmonic difference between how the hooks are used in Ode to the Mets and Russian Coney Island. In Ode to the Mets, there's a 1 chord in there that gives it a major sound. In Russian Coney Island, there is no 1 chord, which gives the chord progression an overall more dark and sinister sound. This is compounded by later on going to an even darker minor 2-5-1 chord progression for the chorus, which is more common to minor jazz songs. So, while the Ode to the Mets hook is reused in Russian Coney Island, Julian changed a lot about it in order to give it a different feeling and harmonic context. In Ode to the Mets, the hook was used to establish a cyclical looping feeling. In Russian Coney Island, the hook is instead used to target minor thirds and create other sorts of jagged movements that creates a more unstable feeling. In a way, this shows us how Julian uses his 2 bands to express different parts of his musical vision. By looking at how the hook is used differently in Ode to the Mets and Russian Coney Island, we get a good appreciation for the duality of Casablancas. But what do you think about how the hook was used in Russian Coney Island? Let me and other fans know in the comments below. If you want to know more about Julian's writing techniques, you can check out this video here about the Adults Are Talking and Square Wave.